Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today our groups, me, Muhammad Bashir, Amir Yusuf and Faris Amin will present about the buy and soft. Alright. Okay, first is the definition of buy and soft. Buy and soft literally means sale or purchase of money for money, including the gold and silver. Technically, buy and soft refers to contract exchange of money for money of the same or different types. However, the Maliki scholars consider that the money exchange only if the sake of gold for gold or silver for silver. But the gold for silver does not belong to such transaction. Okay, so continue with the evidence. The first is from the primary sources, the Quran. The following verse of the Quran implies the general permissibility of the sales contract, including the ba'asah. So the ayah is وَأَهَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى, which means whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has permitted trading and forbidden usury. So the second evidence is the hadith, the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The legality of bai'asaf is indicated in the following hadith, which means exchange of gold for gold, wheat for wheat, barley for barley, dates for dates, or salt for salt shall be in equal quantities and hand to hand. If they differ in type, you may trade them as you wish, provided it is hand to hand without deferment on either side. Okay, so the next evidence is from the secondary sources, which is from the ijma' ulama or the consensus of the scholars. So all of the Islamic scholars are unanimously agree on the permissibility of bai'asaf, as it has been practiced by the people since the time of the Prophet Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam until now without any objections. Okay, continue with the pillars of the bai'asaf contract. The first pillar is the seller and the buyer, which collectively referred as the contracting parties. So the contracting parties shall be a natural person or a legal entity that must have the legal capacity to enter the bai'asaf contract. Any party to bai'asaf may enter into the contract through wakil, through the agent. The next pillar is the offer and acceptance, ijab kabul. A bai'asaf must be entered into through an offer and acceptance between the contracting parties. So the offer and acceptance, the ijab kabul, may be expressed orally, or maybe you can in writing, or by any other methods recognized by the Sharia. Okay, the next pillar is the subject matter, the price and sale of akad. The subject matter of bai'asaf shall be currency, which is known and delivered by the contracting parties during the contract sessions. The currency in bai'asaf shall be determined and mutually agreed by the contracting parties at the time of the execution of the contract. Okay, next is the condition for bai'asaf. The first one is the delivery of currency. The delivery and taking possession of the exchange currency in all bai'asaf contract, in all bai'asaf transactions, regardless of the currency, shall take place in full before the contract session ends. The next, conditional option or khiyar syarat shall not be applied. Conditional option cannot be stipulated. One of the contracting parties may stipulate certain conditions, which if not met, will grant a legal right to the stipulating party to rescind the contract. However, the khiyar, the conditional defect, are allowed. The next condition is non-deferment. Delivery of both counter values should not be deferred to a certain point in time in the future. Okay. So if one of the contract party stipulated a deferment in the receipt of one of the currencies, so the contract is rendered null and void, as had been prescribed. The exchange of goods eligible for riba should be on hand-to-hand basis, should be on the spot. Okay, so in the event that the exchange currency are different, so the transaction may be done at the prevailing currency rate or any mutually agreed rate at the time of the execution of the contract. execution of the buy-ask contract. Okay, so that's all for my part. So I pass to Amir Yusuf.
Thank you, Omar. I will now present about the method of buy al sarf. So buy al sarf can be based on wa'ad, which is promise, or murabaha community. Wa'ad uses unilateral promise, which means the customer promised to purchase or sell foreign currency with a bank. Another essential element of the promise included the purchase of price, currency, and delivery dates, which the promise cannot be conditional on any event. Another one is Murabaha community-based. The customer and the bank will enter into two separate Murabaha transactions, which then facilitate the foreign exchange contract. Then the bank will buy another community and sell it to the customer again for the purchase price plus deal. Typically, the bank and the customer will sell back their community back to the market to gain their investment initial. There's a different kind of arrangement in buy al sarf. First, it can be arrangement of buy al sarf with ijara al-kadamat, which means it can be three things: transfer of money from a different country, cash withdrawal from a different country, and lastly, any service related to counting coins. Next is arrangement of buy al sarf with promise, which is wa'ad. Like I stated earlier, any party can provide a unilateral binding promise to enter into buy al sarf with another party in the future. Next is arrangement with buy al sarf with agency. This means parties with the contract of buy al sarf may appoint an agent to execute buy al sarf and take possession or even deliver the contract or the currency on their behalf. Next is the compilation. There is three things that can complete buy al sarf under this circumstance. First is the possession of the currency exchange between the contracting parties. Next is the set-off of debt obligation between the contracting parties within a different country. Lastly, the transfer of debt obligation to pay the counter value to a third party provided that the settlement is effected on the spot. And lastly, on the method is the application, which is buy al sarf is applicable to most modern spot foreign, which is based on the spot rate. And that's all. I'll pass it on to Faris.
Assalamualaikum, madam. My name is Faris Amimi Shariful Izzat, and today I'm going to present to you about conclusion about Bay Al-Saf. So basically, Bay Al-Saf is considered a trade exchange or a transaction exchange of monetary, but with a certain condition requires, such as the money or the items or the goods that is being exchanged is the same value and has no presence of deferment in the near future. But to implement Bay Al-Saf, there's certain requirements to operate Bay Al-Saf. So such as governance and oversight. So what governance and oversight means is basically like any other companies that requires such as board of directors or managers to manage their company. So same like Bay Al-Saf, where the Bay Al-Saf is implemented in the international financial institution, board of directors or managers need to be the authorities to control and manage the system. And moving on to the structuring. So basically, structuring is a system that helps a company or in the international financial institution to achieve a greater height. So a good structuring or a proper structuring helps the international financial institution to achieve greater heights, such as financially or achieve a greater objective that they vision during last time. Moving on to business and market practices. So like any other company, business and market practices is always needed for a company to become a professionalism. So why they also required? So it does not go against the Sharia law, and good business and market practices will always lead to one person or the whole organization to a professionalism level. Lastly is the submission requirement. So basically to implement by ourselves, the financial institution need to submit a document or a form, basically a form by to the ministry to approve to implement Bail Asaf in the financial institution. And yeah, so this is a certain requirements for the company to operate Bail Asaf or to implement Bail Asaf in the financial institution. So that's all from us. Thank you.